I've given up trying to cure my mental illness, and it's done wonders for my well-being. This was the headline from a recent article I read on MSN, and in today's episode, I explore if the road to better mental health and to happiness is accepting that the opposite is true. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Live Mindfully podcast, the podcast that invites us all to slow down, take a deep breath, and show up as the most mindful, most wholehearted person that we can each day. Last week, I read an article on MSN titled, "I've given up trying to cure my mental illness and it's done wonders for my well-being." I've included the article in the show notes. The article goes on to share the experience of a 37-year-old English woman named Jen Sizeland, who from a young age has had, in her own words, poor mental health. And at the ripe old age of 37, Jen has the following conditions: OCD, generalized anxiety disorder, panic attacks, and depressive moods. Now, the reason the title caught my eye is because 6.5 years ago, I was in a very similar place. I had a 6-month-old daughter, a 3-year-old son, very little hands-on support around. My husband was working 60-hour weeks and my family lived in Sydney. And I think if we had our time again, we would have done things very differently. And without going into it too much, there was also a lot of very bad behavior happening with people who were in our life. But I was also trying to be too much, which was very much my MO. What I really needed to be doing at that time was focusing on myself and my babies and not getting caught up in other people's drama. And I robbed myself of that. So, of course, my mental health went down the drain. And I think most people are like this. We all want to be the best. We want to be very happy versions of ourselves. We want to be the happiest versions of ourselves that we can be. We want to be mentally well. We want to be physically well. We want to have good thoughts and be good people. We want to try to be the best parents we can be and the best friends and the best partners and the best employees. We want to wake up and be on the best road we can be to our mental and physical health. But then life happens. That's how we think of it, right? Someone upsets us or we feel like we're too busy, not realizing, who's putting all this pressure on ourselves? People come along and take advantage of our kindness. We accidentally treat someone else poorly and then we feel bad about that, or we just wake up in a bad mood, or we want to make our lives better and we need more money to do that, or we want things we don't have or we can't have. And for some reason, the default is to blame ourselves and to feel shame about that and to feel guilty and to feel sad. And because there is so much conflicting information out there, we don't really know what we should be doing. Should we be feeling our feelings, as Brené Brown says? And if we should be, how long should we feel our feelings for? And when does it become wallowing in our feelings versus feeling our feelings? Should we meditate even when we hate sitting still and we don't enjoy it at all? Should we radically accept how we are feeling, and will this make us feel better in the end? Should we seek therapy or go on antidepressants? And if we do that, will we be on them forever? Should we veg out on the couch and watch TV or drink? Take THC or do exercise? And after contemplating the millions of options, we all feel, so exhausted. And on top of that, we start sleeping poorly. And then there's a whole other cycle that starts. So rewinding back to 6 years ago for me, I was doing everything. I knew I had anxiety and I knew I had depression, and I was doing everything I could to get better. I was in therapy. I was eating as healthy as I could. I was limiting TV. I was getting fresh air. I was listening to all the podcasts. I was reading all the books. And I was exhausted. I was absolutely exhausted. I was the mother of a 6-month-old and a 3-year-old with virtually no hands-on support around me. And I was really trying to prove a point that I could do it on my own. I was also planning a wedding. And about a week before my bachelor's party, I rang my sister in floods of tears. I, to this day, cannot recall ever crying in this way. And I said to her, I'm so sick and tired of waking up and wondering where the sun is behind these clouds. I'm so tired of reading and listening and meditating and doing yoga and exercising and going for walks and eating healthy and limiting TV. I am beyond exhausted. I am so sick of smiling. I'm so sick of pretending. I'm so sick of being kind when others are being so cruel behind my back and spreading lies. I'm so sick of it all. And look, truth be told, and this is very hard to say, I do think that at that point I was very close to being suicidal. And this next statement might be a triggering one for you, so please feel free to skip forward by 10 seconds and do that now. I do understand why people take their own lives. And it's because of that period of time that I went through. And my sister said to me, okay, babe, just stop. Instead of trying to not be sad or trying to work through being sad, just be okay with maybe being sad forever. And I hadn't tried that. I had not tried on what if this is just how I am? What if I just accept that I am sad and that I might be sad forever? Radical acceptance, at its most basic, is a practice that involves accepting emotions, thoughts, and circumstances that are unchangeable and out of your control. To radically accept means to completely recognize and accept the reality you're in, even when that reality includes pain or discomfort. In fact, most of us who need to embrace this concept of radical acceptance are 100% in pain and discomfort. That's why it's radical acceptance, because it's very hard to accept the deep pain and the deep discomfort that we are in. Like I do, and if you have been listening to this podcast for a while now, you will know this to be true. I very quickly analyzed these thoughts. I weighed them in my mind, the pros and the cons. I didn't like the idea of being sad forever, but I also had no energy to be anything but sad. I didn't like that this might just be who I am now. But I also I just didn't care anymore. I was sick of pretending and everyone could see through it. And I was sick of complaining and whinging and comparing myself to everyone else in my own mind. The reality was that just accepting actually seemed like the much easier option at that point. when I really weighed up the biggest pro was, well, I don't really have to do anything. There's no action I need to take to just accept. I didn't have to read anything. I didn't have to listen to any more podcasts. I didn't have to feel my feelings. I didn't have to meditate. I didn't have to self-medicate because I wasn't trying to escape being sad. I was just going to be sad Laurie. And that kind of felt okay. Just to be sad Laurie, because I'd already done it for quite some time. I mean, I was fighting against it the whole time, but maybe I could get really good at just being sad Laurie is kind of the thought process that was going through my mind. Like, oh, I'd probably be really good at that. I've been sad for a really long time now. Because fighting against it was draining me and drowning me. Fighting against it was making it worse by 1,000%. And now I don't really know if I want to make this next statement because I don't want to give false hope. And I want to be really clear that in that moment and in that conversation, it really had started to sink in, and I had really started to accept and surrender to the fact that I was going to be sad forever. Like I was really putting that on, really wearing that. And maybe in time that would change, but I had really felt quite comfortable relaxing into, well, I'm sad and I'm just going to be sad and that's okay. I had really heard my sister's words and I had nothing left to fight with anyway. But I also think it is really important that you know how I got here. The next day I woke up, and we know from the podcast that I did about sleep that when we do go to bed at night, we have an opportunity to process emotions, and that happens while we sleep. So getting really good sleep is important. And if you haven't listened to the podcast about sleep, please go back. It's a fantastic one. The next day I woke up and I felt different. I couldn't really tell if the sadness had shifted or if this is just what it felt like to be in radical acceptance, bearing in mind that at the time I didn't know what that term meant. I now realize what I did and what my sister was asking me to do. I don't think she realized what it was either, but at the time that wasn't a term that was in either of our vernacular. And I'm still not sure now, thinking back on it, whether it was radical acceptance or whether the sadness had shifted, but it didn't matter. I just felt different. And every day I woke up feeling a little bit different. I don't want to say I felt better, because at that point in time I couldn't tell. It was just a different feeling. And then there was also this panic, because this undercurrent of panic, because I really didn't want this new, different feeling to go away. And then about 2 months later, and I still have the photo, I posted it on Instagram on Wednesday, the 18th of April in 2018. I walked out onto my veranda, as I often did each morning, and I looked at the sky. And it was really dark. The clouds were really dark, low on the horizon. It was very, very strong rain clouds. And then the clouds shifted. And because the sun was rising, it looked like the sun was coming up past the dark clouds. The sun hadn't actually come up past them yet, but you could see the sun rays. And as the sun was rising and coming into the sky, there were still clouds in the sky above, but they were much lighter. They were nowhere near as dense. They were much more dispersed. And I remember thinking, even in my deep sadness, there is still beauty here. And I'd missed that key piece of information. I'd missed that beauty still exists here within myself and out in the world. That even in sadness and in depression and in anxiety, there is more there than just darkness. And more often than not, those self-judgments, wishing things were different, and the need to control things that you cannot do anything about, is what keeps you locked out of seeing the beauty that exists all around and within you. And I think Jen, who wrote this article, I think she is right when she says in the article, we live in a world that tells us that when we work hard enough, our circumstances will change. And nobody, at least at that point in time, it did not feel like anybody was working harder than me. And my circumstances were very much anything but changing. And I agree with her again that letting go of that idea that if I just worked harder, it would change, especially as it relates to getting mentally well, has helped me irrevocably, just as it has her. That was 6 years ago. And radical acceptance is probably the one thing that pulled me back from anxiety and from depression and from sadness. But every day now, I practice radical acceptance. I understand that judging myself is unhelpful. I believe I am feeling my feelings, but not wallowing in them, just by accepting that today is how I feel and that's okay. And I have absolutely no desire anymore to control things or help people in the way that I used to, in getting caught up in other people's drama. Radical acceptance has allowed me to set boundaries because it's how I feel and it's what is right for me. And if that doesn't resonate or sit well with you, the boundary that I have set, well, that's not my problem. Radical acceptance has very much allowed me to love myself as I am because I'm not trying to be anything different for anyone else. I'm not even trying to be anything different for myself. This is how I have showed up today. And one of the key, most important aspects of radical acceptance is letting go of perfectionism. And for that, I don't care how my life looks to anyone else anymore. It's my life and I'm going to live it how I want to. And if I think that you are treating me poorly, you have a one-way ticket out of my life. I seek out the beauty in the world around me every minute of every day. I look for it, and I only do that because I accept that things are the way they are. And I have seen that beauty exists in darkness. And this has brought me an incredible peace. And that in turn has brought me joy. So by accepting that I would never be happy again, accepting that I would live in sadness forever, somehow I found happiness. Just something to think about. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If this episode has triggered you or resonated with you in any way, I do encourage you to seek out the support you need. We do need support when we are going through these deeply challenging times. And perhaps looking into radical acceptance is something that is right for you as well. But we need support, so don't be afraid to reach out and get that. You can also write to me with your experience in total confidence. I would never share any of the emails that I've received. I would keep your anonymity. You can email me at hello@lauriemore.co. Have a great week. Try to seek out the beauty that exists all around us, even in the darkness. I'll be back again next week. Until then, take good care of yourself.